Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of the modding series, where I'll attempt at least to add a new storyline to the New Horizons game. And, I did consider trying to go into some detail on what I'm planning to do here, but instead I think I'll just jump into it since it should be fairly straightforward. And basically, I am going to add a storyline, and it's going to be a more or less linear storyline. And what it will end up being, I don't know, but I have a working title at least, and that is The Strange and Wonderful Journeys of Bertram Radclyffe. And I could, of course, say that this is a working title, so I don't really need to use it when I'm finished, but I think it's more interesting to play with the cards that one are dealt, to put it like that. And this title is something that I thought sounded nice, so I'll go with that title for now. And ideally, I'll end up also with using that title, which means that we have some information we can glean from it. And one thing is the, let's say, the tone of the story. It sort of hints at us story that's not that serious, perhaps adventure-ish type of story. Strange and wonderful journeys. It sounds like a fun journey through, in this case, the Caribbean. It could, of course, be that this is meant to be ironic, or it could also be some other explanation, as I will soon consider. But at least for now, we can say that it seems like a fun adventure type story. And you also have a name, Bertram Radclyffe, and presumably that would be main character in the story. But also some alternatives. It could be that this is the companion of the main character. For example, the companion describes the adventures of the main character. Or it could be, for example, the title of a book that the character has in his possession and that he follows, in which case you are somewhat free to choose a genre for the actual story. And it could also be, for example, that it is the name of the ship that the character is sailing around in. So there are some possibilities, but most likely possibility it seems like it would be the name of the title with Bertram Radclyffe being the main character. So let's try to determine this with a pair of dice, which is one of the tools that I'm going to use to try to determine the storyline. And in this case, let's throw 2 dice. And let's say that the main character being Bertram Radclyffe is what's most likely. So let's say that from 4 to 10 on the dice means that we have the main character as Bertram Radclyffe, and any other number means that throw again with a sort of wider range of categories, alternatives, and see what we will end up with then. But first, let's just do a simple throw to determine if the main character is actually Bertram Radclyffe. So 9, okay, and in which case, yes, main character is named Bertram Radclyffe, and this is the story of his adventures or misadventures through the Caribbean. So then we know a little bit more, and the next, I guess, is to find out what kind of story it is, and by that I mean the general story structure. And story structures. Well, there are a lot of these that can be used. Basically, you have had researchers or similar people analyzing existing stories and describing how the narratives, storylines in the story develop, and based on this, they have used some kind of classification to determine common story types, typically popular stories. And we can choose among these set of categories. And I found one some time ago on the internet, and it was based on some kind of automated text analysis approach, and it divided the stories that it looked at. I think it's a fairly high number, more than 1,000 stories, into 6 categories. And the first one is simply a rags to riches type story, and this in a rags to riches type story, you typically start at a low point and then you end at a high point. And even though the name implies that it's related to wealth, it doesn't necessarily need to be. It can be more or less anything. Perhaps a story about a person looking for love, and he starts off lonely, and he ends up finding the woman of his dreams, or something like this. So it can be really anything. But we have 6 of these story structures. The first one is rags to riches. The second one is riches to rags, which is the opposite. And then there are 4 other categories, which are more complicated. So you usually have a combination of, for example, a fall followed by a rise, and so on. And ideally, I would like to keep things a little bit simple, since there will be more than enough complexity going forward. So I'm going to prioritize the first 2 categories, and as for the title of the story and the name of the main character, I'll use 2 dice, and I can probably use the same probability numbers. So we have 2 and 3 and 12 and 11, which will result in a read-through with all the categories available, and between 4 and 10, we will have either a rags to riches story or riches to rags story, and we'll place the rags to riches story at the bottom, meaning that up to 6 it'll be a rags to riches story, and after that we'll have riches to rags story from 7 and up. So let's throw and see how it goes. Day 4. Okay, well, let's barely within the rags to riches category. So a simple rags to riches storyline. So we start at a low point, and we end up at a high point. And that means that we know what kind of let's say emotional ride will have the story, but need to find out kind of story, kind of topic, what kind of element it is that the character is chasing. And one obvious possibility is riches, and to choose between the different categories, this time I'm going to use set of cards. So I have the Tarot of the Pirates, which I purchased some time ago, and I didn't really know what I was going to use it for, but this seems like a good purpose. And we can have, for example, rags to riches story that actually concerns rags and riches. So the person starts at a low point economically, and then you have some kind of adventure where he ends up being a rich man. That's not the only type of story. You can also have kind of emotional story where a character is looking for some kind of love interest, and the odd image suggests a certain specific type of emotional attachment, but let's just go with a card meaning in general rather than be too hung up on the actual illustration. So that's another type of story, and another alternative is you can have a character that goes through a journey to gain some kind of position in society. So he goes from a low point to some kind of leadership or similar powerful position. That's one type of story we can have. But that's not necessarily the only one. So we have this. I talked a little bit about this in the previous episode that I was going to set this story at a period when the secession wars are going on in Europe. So we have some kind of conflict going on, and let's just use this to illustrate that. So you have the character participating in some kind of conflict related to, for example, the secession wars. So now we have wills, emotional attachment, power, and let's say war. But you could also have a more, say, doesn't necessarily be to be romantic love. You can have a person that has some kind of loneliness, or perhaps doesn't have any friends, but he manages to obtain this through some kind of adventure. So he goes from being lonely to having lots of companions. And let's use this illustration for that. And finally, let's just have one additional card that goes for a sort of journey-like story where the character goes on an adventure and experiences various things. So these are the cards that I will use. So let's sort these a little bit, shuffle these cards a little bit, and then try to choose one of them, see what we end up with. Take this one. Okay, so he will actually have some kind of adventure-like journey. So that fits quite well with the title of the story. So that's nice. So we now know that we have some character called Bertram Radclyffe that goes on some kind of adventure. And I have determined that, or decided that the person should at least appear to be British, as in he's most likely British, but He could also be some kind of other nationality, but for example, a French spy or something. That's probably not so relevant in this kind of story, but there's still the possibility of him not being British, even though he presents himself as that. So let's try to determine that also. And for this, I guess we can use the dice again. So let's go for same kind of probability as previously. So 2 and 3 are, and 11 and 12 are a read-through on list of nationalities table, and for the other numbers, he is a British person, born and raised in Britain. So 8, okay, well, he is British. Bertram is a Brit, and he arrives in the Caribbean for some kind of reason, and presumably he starts out at a low point, and that could be that perhaps he has some kind of boring life, some kind of tedium in his life, or some other kind of perhaps some kind of tragedy in his life, something that makes him travel to the Caribbean. And let's see if we can't find some kind of reason for this also. And one reason could be what we use as the war. So for some reason he is led. He ends up traveling to the Caribbean because of some kind of war situation or similar that happens presumably in England. We don't need to go into detail yet, but at least that kind of situation. It could also be legal problems. He's exiled to not necessarily Caribbean, but thrown out of England. So he isn't allowed to be there. And another possibility could be some kind of death, perhaps death in the family. And so it seems like a good possibility. And could also have kind of emotional motivation. So perhaps he looking for some kind of love interest, or some kind of love interest didn't go so well, and he ended up choosing to leave England. Perhaps he embarrassed himself or something like this. He also have some kind of disaster, family ruin, or perhaps his home or workplace broke down, and for this reason he ended up leaving for other shores. That's one possibility. And there could also be other options, such as some kind of conflict, strife he was involved in. It could be perhaps the target of some kind of unsavory character that for some reason caused him lots of problem and led to him leaving the country. It could be a desire for gold and adventure. So That's some alternative, but I think we can also have some more, and generally was disliked. Or simply that he was foolish person that thought he could succeed in the Caribbean in some kind of way. And let's have one more. This one. So it could be that he simply wanted to try to travel to foreign place to experience adventure. So let's go with these alternatives. Let's shuffle a little bit. Spread them out like this, and take this one. And that was he was involved in some kind of conflict. So now we know a little bit more. He was from England, and he was involved in some kind of conflict, which led him to come to the Caribbean. And this seems like it was a conflict on a personal level, so perhaps he had a fight with somebody the place he lived, and he ended up choosing to leave for the Caribbean. So now we know quite a lot more, but it could perhaps be useful to see what kind of conflict that he will face when he arrives, and also a little bit about his social status when he was in England. One alternative, he was a criminal. Another possibility, he was part of the servant class. And we have merchant class is also a possibility. He could have been part of the aristocracy in some kind of way. Perhaps simple working class. Or he was perhaps actually some kind of royalty. That's also a possibility. So yeah, I think we have quite a lot of alternatives, 6 alternatives, but let's say that these two and this one are less likely than these here. So what I think I'm going to do is that I'm going to draw first one card, and if it is one of these 3, I will draw another card, and if the card is not in among one of these 3, I will use the card that I drew the second time. So that should increase the likelihood that we end up in this category here. Okay, just again shuffle the cards. And let's see what the first card is. That's aristocracy. So he might be an aristocrat, but for that we will need to have one more of the rare cards. So let's take this one. And that was the merchant class. So okay, we end up with this one. So he was part of the merchant class, and that means that perhaps he had a conflict with one of his competitors, and this led to him leaving England for more happy times in the Caribbean. So now we know quite a lot actually, and that means that he left England, and he had some kind of fight there, and then he comes to the Caribbean where he wants, or essentially ends up uh, experiencing some kind of adventure. But let's have a look at the scope of the adventure that he experiences, and it could be on several levels. It could be a world-spanning conflict that he is affected by. It could be personal levels among his companions, for example. It could also be conflict that say some more regional level, for example, a town or a set of towns nearby. And it could also be personal levels, or perhaps he has some kind of inner conflicts that he needs to face. Now we have these four alternatives: so personal, interpersonal, uh, low society, and the world. Perhaps we should have one in between here. So this is perhaps town or local region. This is the whole world, and we have something that's more like the whole Caribbean, for example, at least the parts of it that are in the game. So you can use this one for that. So in this case, I think it's can have an equal probability of these. So let's just choose among these randomly. Like this one. Okay, so it's actually a world level conflict. So he will experience a kind of adventure related to presumably the session wars in Europe. So it will be very significant kind of fate of the world kind of adventure, perhaps. We will have to see. And let's see what kind of position that he will have, and I guess we can use something similar for that. So he could have personal level. So he himself is what is he's his own worst enemy. We could perhaps have some kind of major antagonist in this area, and that is what causes his problems. Could be someone on town level, for example, in one of the towns where he travels to. Um, it could be say kind of religious organization or group that causes problems. Supernatural opponents. So we have a personal level. Let's see if we can have some kind of interpersonal level also. And use this one. Betrayal or subterfuge from some of those close to him. And since there is a card for it, also put in something that represents, I guess, some kind of monster or similar creature that haunts the Caribbean. So we have these categories. We have some kind of monster. We have a major antagonist. We have religious. We have undead. We have some kind of local city level antagonist. We have interpersonal level type of conflict, or a personal level conflict. So let's see what we end up with. Again, this is something that I think can just be chosen randomly. That's okay. See what we end up with. And take this one. Okay, so we actually have some kind of major antagonist in this area, and the illustration is quite apt. So presumably there's some kind of major pirate antagonist in this area that will be the main antagonist for the hero as he goes through his adventures on his journey through the Caribbean. And this antagonist will presumably have some kind of plans that can affect the outcome of the conflict in Europe. So this seems slightly interesting, and yes, and I think we have quite a lot of pieces in place for this story. And let's think a little bit about how we start the story then. So the character leaves England and arrives in the Caribbean, and his immediate motivation for leaving was that he was involved in some kind of conflict. You can take this in order. So he was a merchant in London, presumably, and whether his business went well or not, that I do not know, but he had some kind of conflict with another merchant, presumably in London, and that caused him to leave for the Caribbean, where he then wanted to go, or was motivated by experiencing a kind of adventure, presumably the times that he had in England were not so entertaining. He wanted to experience something new. So he traveled to the Caribbean, and I guess that he didn't really have many plans about what he was going to do or what he was going to experience. But he ends up having some kind of antagonists facing him for some kind of conflict that will have an impact on a major world level conflict. And that means that we can probably use some of the openings that are in the other storylines in the game. He basically starts out fresh in the Caribbean and doesn't really have any major motivations or goals or anything similar. So he arrives, and things will then happen as they develop based on who he meets and what he experiences. So we can probably start in the same way as many of the other storylines start, inside the cabin. I would have liked to start somewhere else, but we need a little bit of exposition, I guess, at the start. So let's say that he sold off most of his belongings and then traveled to the Caribbean. And I'm not certain if he should have his own boat at the start or not. I guess it would be simpler if he does have a ship. So he has a very simple ship, and he has purchased some kind of goods that he will take to the Caribbean. So I guess we can use slightly unoriginal, perhaps, but we start very simple with something not unlike the other storylines, where he starts out in the cabin, and his first mate or something similar comes into his cabin and tells him that we have now arrived in the Caribbean, and not only the Caribbean, but in Philipsburg. And he informs him that he should go talk to that and that merchant in order to sell the cargo that they have brought with them. And perhaps he should go introduce himself to some of the major characters in the town, which I assume is the person running the store, and perhaps the person that is at the shipyard, and the mayor, at least. So we can have this kind of dialogue, and then the character starts in the harbor area. So we go have a dialogue, and then we teleport to the harbor area. I can think that works. It's not very exciting, perhaps, somewhat simple, but I think that should work. So, and with that, I think we have what we require to start putting in the first pieces, and I will now go through the code changes that I will do in order to implement this after I have done that, and then I finally try out the new code and see how it works. So that gives us the basic structure of the story and some information on the backstory. And I have fleshed out a little bit more on what actually happened before the game starts. And I did consider going through it, but I think instead I'll perhaps put in parts of the backstory as we progress as part of the game dialogue, and that's perhaps the simplest way to do it. So the short story is perhaps that Bertram Radclyffe is a person that is not very suited for adventure, one might think. He has had very little experience with anything apart from staying in London and working at the company Wilson and Radclyffe. But circumstances cause him to travel to the Caribbean, and that is where the game starts. Okay, so then it's time to go through the code changes, and as usual, there were some design decisions that were made, and this was, well, you could say, the first one was related to how to start adding in the mod, and there is this game mode or storyline selection menu at the start of a new game creation, and I did initially consider using this to choose the storyline, so that I added a new storyline from this menu, but first look at changes that would be required for this mean that probably not worth it so far. So what I'm instead going to do is to, as I think I hinted at in the previous episode, simply use the free play mode and then piggyback on top of that one and add this as an additional story. So this means that the changes that I needed to make was the very first start of the game. So when you first start controlling your character, and if you go into the storyline of, for example, Nathaniel Hawke, then you come to the captain's cabin in your ship, and you are met by one of your crewmates that start taking you through the tutorial. And this is the dialogue of Malcolm Hatcher. So this dialogue is quite complicated. You can see the size of this file here. This is quite big, and there is a lot of things that's going on here. So I wanted to ideally avoid this file, meaning that I try to avoid the tutorial when I added in the start of the storyline. And one reason for this is that, well, this file is quite complicated, so adding more code to it only makes it more complicated, and it makes it more difficult to understand what is going on. So what I chose to do was to look at the other storylines, and the one that fit what I wanted to do best was the assassin storyline, where you start on the harbor in one of the towns, and you are met by a person from your crew that comes towards you. And this is the approach that I chose for the storyline. So I wanted to start in Philipsburg, where Bertram Radclyffe has just gotten off the ship he arrived in, and one of the crewmates he traveled with comes to basically set some of the context for what happens next. So that meant that I could take a look at the code for the assassin storyline and use that as a starting point for doing what I wanted to do. And one other thing I did was that I created a file called Radclyffe functions, and this is meant to hold the code that is relevant for this mod. It can't contain all of it, but it can at least contain some of it. And this one is in the top level of the programs file, and to have this one be executed, I had to modify this one, dogs.c, and I added in this one, include this one here, which meant that it will now be executed. And here I have function called isRadclyffe that I'm going to use for checks in the code for when I want to try to execute code related to the mod. And then there's a Radclyffe start story and a Radclyffe quest complete function. And these are called from start storyline file in storyline free play directory. So here we have the code that starts the free play storyline, and I basically just throw in my code here. I'm going to try to change this one so that it does some checks on whether this is actually the correct storyline or not. So if you look here, I still haven't activated this code, but I'm basically going to check if the name is Bertram Radclyffe and the land is associated with England, and whether the year is correct. And if this is true, I'm going to execute the Radclyffe function. So this code here will probably be replaced by that. And this means that I can check whether the storyline is executed or not, and this is the start of the story, so it sets up everything related to the free play code, and I'm probably going to have to make some additional changes here if I want to have the general free play quests and missions and so on available when I play the mod I'm adding, but for now I just do things in the simplest way. And there was also one other file, quest reactions, and here it is similar. This is executed on quest completion, and where this is that I basically to make things a little bit simpler, I name the quests with an RC uppercase underscore character, so that I just can jump into this separate function that handles the quest related to this mod if the quest is relevant for the mod. So in this case, it's fairly simple. So if you go through it from the start here, so we have this one that I haven't activated yet, that checks whether this is a playthrough of the Radclyffe storyline or not, meaning that whether it's a character that is supposed to be Bertram Radclyffe. And then there's the start story, which is executed at the start of the game, and there's some code here that I just copied from the Assassin storyline that I will probably change as I go along. Then I changed location to Philipsburg Port, and I added a log entry for the Journal of Bertram Radclyffe, and I added a quest, and I also made some minor changes to have the port of Philipsburg be friendly towards Bertram, towards England. So this is the basic start. Probably going to need some more than this, but for now this is enough to let me start adding in code. So some generic code, and then the quest which starts things rolling. And here I have a quest called RC Intro, and if we look at this one, which is this one here, and I create a character. Then again, this is code that's similar to the one that was in the Assassin's mod. It creates a character, and it has him go to Bertram, and it starts the dialogue. And this needed to be a separate file, I think. So this is the dialogue for the character that is talking to Radclyffe, and I see that I'm still missing some code for setting his name. And if we have a look at that file also, and it's fairly simple. So it's just two dialogue options, but rather one dialogue option with two sets of dialogues. But there's one important detail here, and that is regarding the text in the dialogues. And this game has a localization system. So if you see here, we have English, for example, and we have Spanish and Russian. So it's possible to play, at least in theory. I don't know the quality of the translations for all of these storylines. You can, in theory, play through the game using, in this case, either English, Spanish, or Russian. And the way that this is done, if you take a look at one of the other dialogues, this one, for example, is that in this text field here, you have a reference to an array and an offset in that array. And if you go into the corresponding file for the actual text messages, you can see that there's one entry per line, and the number corresponds to the text that is used. And so if you have English, then the files in this directory are used, and if you use Russian, then the files in that directory is used, and so on. So by not using this numbering, I will end up with code that is not localized, but that's where I see it unproblematic and convenient for several reasons. One is that it makes it simpler to synchronize this code with the main repository, since I don't have to worry about the numbers of the text message indexes or offsets coming out of sync. So I can just update the code and then continue to use these dialogues here, and they will still continue working without any conflicts. And of course, when I'm eventually finished with the storyline, I might wish to add localization before I try to have this added to the main repository, in which case I just go through all the files and extract these hard-coded text messages and have them moved into the .h files for each language instead. So this is simply because it makes working on the code simpler, and not because this is the correct way to do it if I'm going to write code that is properly localized. So to dialogue here, and the second one, when this one is finished, we have the character running away from us and going about his business after having talked to us, and then the game starts properly. So it's fairly simple, just the very initial part of the game. Okay, so let's try out the new code changes. I made some minor tweaks to the code after creating the previous bits, but it's essentially identical to what I went through earlier. So let's create a new game and go to free play, and to have this be treated as the Radclyffe storyline, we add in some information here. So the name, the year, and the character class merchant. And this should be enough to have a start as Bertram Radclyffe. And here we are, Philipsburg port, and I used this model. I thought that it looked a bit like someone who's not a sailor but more a merchant, perhaps, or some non-naval individual. I think that I'll probably reach a point in the game where Bertram starts looking a little bit more like an adventure pirate or something, so there might be an option to change the model at that time, but for now I will just go with this one. And nothing in the quest book yet, but in the ship's log we have an entry. So, journal log entry number 1. And it's in 1710. Circumstances outside my predictions have led me to leave the routine and predictability that has been my existence thus far. We have reached the end of a sea journey that have brought us all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. The toll it took on my body, not accustomed to such punishment as only the mountainous waves of the deep sea far removed from the safety of safe harbors can inflict, is such that if I had possessed knowledge of its debilitating effects beforehand, I would remain cocooned in that comforting haven of my previous life. But lacking such foreknowledge, and having now shed the skin of inexperience, and as our ship again nears the embers of civilization, like Hercules returning from the underworld, I feel myself again in control of my physical aspect and having regained the power of locomotion, in addition to the ability to keep a consistent thought for a duration sufficient to string a meaningful sequence of words together in a sentence, the desire to document my travels in these strange lands has made known its presence in my consciousness. This journal will serve as a witness to my experiences for my future self, to aid in their reenactment on the stage of a mind in such time as my memories are found lacking. Ah, there it is. Those sweet, long-awaited words of terra firma once again being within gaze distance of those aboard this wooden vessel that has brought us across the vast sea. Philipsburg awaits. I will return to this narrative once my affairs in this outpost has been concluded. Let's make the numbers dance again. Yes, I didn't go through the introduction, or rather the backstory, so what is going on might still be a little bit difficult to understand, but he seems like quite a character now, doesn't he? And here we have one of the crew members, so this is quite similar to the start of the Assassin's storyline, where you start at the port of some city, and then this first character comes to talk to you. And this is one of the crew members from the and I don't know quite how much he will be used in this storyline. Perhaps he will be a recurring character, or perhaps he will only appear at the beginning, such as now. So, even Dixley, and what does he have to say to us? Mr. Radclyffe, are you certain you do not wish me to accompany you? We are far from the shores of England. These Caribbean towns can be dangerous. Fear not, I have studied in detail the journals of many a travelled to these shores. There should before me nothing that I have not prepared for mentally. I see. In that case, Mr. Radclyffe, I will search out those that package their goods and have them come to the tavern. Come meet them after you have been to the store and have copied the records of the owner. Splendid. We should be able to complete our investigation here in time for tea and biscuits. And then he runs off. And we have an update to our quest book. Arrival in Philipsburg. Having finally arrived in these strange and uncivilized waters, the time has come to cast a light of knowledge and understanding over the details of what has become of the goods ordered by our company, that were now brought across the sea in the opposite direction of the one I just traversed. I will first talk to the owner of the local store, who should have records of our transaction, and then go to the local tavern to interview the men that prepared the packages for transit. The mystery of the one missing coconut will not remain a mystery for long. And here I guess the main purpose of the beginning of the story becomes apparent, and the motivation for Bertram to come all this way was perhaps a little bit more complicated, but at least the stated motivation is to find out what happened to an order for the company where Bertram works. Bertram, Wilson and Radclyffe ordered a large number of coconuts from the Caribbean, but on the manifest that came with the coconuts, there was a number that was different from the actual number of coconuts. So, for various reasons that have not been stated so far, Bertram chose to come all this way to try to track down the missing coconut. So that's what we have so far, and here we are in Philipsburg, and can move around a little bit.
Could you spare a moment, kind sir?
I don't need your advice. So
My word, what a distinguished young man.
So here we are in Philipsburg, and even though it looks like Nathaniel Hawke, this time it's not. So we shall see what happens. Okay, so that's what we have so far. It's only about a minute of playtime, but there was some work involved in trying to find out how to put together the pieces that were necessary to get that 1 minute of game time. So with some luck, it's possible to reuse some of that knowledge to make things proceed a little bit more smoothly from now on. So at least the dialogue handling, it seems fairly straightforward. So adding more dialogue options, dialogues with other characters and so shouldn't be a big problem. And we will have to see what we need to do when we have more exciting events that happen, such as combat and such not. And that's more or less it for this time. Next time I will look a little bit more on what might be going on in Philipsburg, and see if we can't put in place some potential conflicts for the first part of the story. But that's it for now. So thank you for watching, listening, and goodbye for now. Bye bye.